us there. Thanks so much. Let's get into all of it now with trial attorney Kelly Hyman and CNN political commentator Errol Lewis. He's also the host of Spectrum News' The Big Deal with Errol Lewis. Good morning to you both. Kelly, let me start with you. And we heard some of what the former president said there yesterday. How much does what he says in these speeches, what he posts on social media, influence sentencing on July 11th and what the judge decides to hand down?
The judge will consider everything. So ultimately, it's going to be up to the judge to make a determination on what exactly the punishment is, whether the former president should do jail time, whether he should do probation, or whether he should pay a fine. So ultimately, it's going to be up to the judge. Now, some mitigating factors the judge could consider is Trump's age, being 77 years old, and also the fact that he's a first-time offender. Both sides, the state and the defendant, will submit memos to the court to look at, and then Trump will also sit for an interview with the probation officer, and they'll ask him questions like, what are your job prospects? What is your income? And then ultimately it'll go back to the judge.
Let's talk about the politics here, Errol. And we heard in Kristen's package there from some of the president's closest allies and supporters, Congressman Donalds, Senator Vance. But I want to play a little more from Senator Tim Scott there, who has offered this full-throated endorsement, singing the president's tune about a witch hunt and rigged trial. Here's what he said, and then I want your thoughts.
As an African American born and raised in the Deep South who had concerns about our justice system as it relates to race, I'm now seeing it play out from a partisan perspective. Now it's not as much black and white as it is red and blue.
Drawing a comparison from centuries of discrimination and inequity as it relates to race and saying this is the same thing just for Republicans. Your thoughts?
Well, for Tim Scott to have suddenly discovered injustice is itself a little bit startling for somebody with the level of power that he has. But no, and look, in this case, it has nothing to do with any kind of institutional long-standing injustice. That is a separate question altogether. The issues that were at stake in this trial, and I don't know if Tim Scott ever set foot in Manhattan criminal court prior to anything related to this case, but the reality is that this is a business case. It's a business records case. It's a fraud case. It was an election interference case. It was all of those things. The notion that the system is fundamentally unfair, we're looking for the evidence. Donald Trump says the same thing over and over and over again. But your viewers should know that these questions were raised early on, and they were handled within the court, within the context of the trial. The questions about bias, the questions about venue, the questions about what evidence could come in. We have a structured system, and to the extent that it didn't work for Donald Trump, I understand him being upset. But to then say that the whole system is wrong and that this somehow compares to the historic injustices that black folk have had to deal with is really just silly. It's simply not true.
Kelly, you mentioned that one of, and we've known for some time, one of the options here for the judge is jail time for former President Trump. Considering the first-time offender status and his age, do you think that's possible? It's realistic that the president would be sentenced to jail?
Well, anything is possible. It'll be interesting to see what exactly the states ask for, and potentially they could ask for jail time. And of course, the defendant is going to say, no, there should be no jail time. But the judge is going to look at everything. They're going to look at his other cases as well, the E. Jean Carroll case. They're going to look at, as you stated, what he's done in the past before and consider all that. But most likely it'll be probation. It'll be interesting to see if the judge stays the penalty while Trump has said that he's going to appeal this case.
Does the gag order, Kelly, matter anymore?
The gag order does matter because the judge still has jurisdiction over the case. Now, the judge can also consider the gag order as well about the violations in his penalty phase as well. But definitely the gag order is definitely in place. And it's also important for the viewers to note that Trump, once he is sentenced, at that point, he is a convicted felon. So not until he's sentenced in July, he'll be a convicted felon.
Okay, important note there. Errol, let me come to you on the deliberation within the Biden campaign about how aggressively to go after Trump in this context, whether to call him a criminal, whether to call him a convicted felon to use this as a cudgel. What's the risk here for the president if he goes full on in that direction?
Well, you have to be careful not to fall into the trap of acting as if the White House was somehow involved in this. I mean, one of the biggest falsehoods that keeps getting trumpeted from the Trump side of all of this is this notion that it was all directed from the White House and not handled locally by a locally elected prosecutor, a grand jury of ordinary citizens, and a trial jury also involving ordinary citizens. This is something that is really pernicious. It has the notion that it's fundamentally rigged has led to death threats, over 89 death threats against the local prosecutor. It's a very serious situation. And so not just for political reasons, but just from the standpoint of keeping the peace in the streets, not triggering another January 6th, which, frankly, Donald Trump has been sort of egging on his supporters, telling them to come down and protest at the courthouse. They didn't show up, but you have real concerns about that. So, yeah, the White House has to be very, very careful about what they say, why they say it, and whether or not they need to, frankly. This is the front page of every newspaper in the country. No particular need for the White House to weigh in.
All right, we'll see if they continue as they have been, very cautious in this area. Errol, Kelly, thank you.